Well, I know you're all here to learn about printing cards, and start out with a quick little overview, and then we'll get right to the live demo. So one thing we did do this week, finally, was we got up some Photoshop templates for printing the cards, and we also have PDF instructions for both Photoshop and Lightroom. Currently, the templates are just for Photoshop. I'm going to work on the Lightroom ones over the next couple of weeks, but the instructions do cover whether you're printing in Photoshop or Lightroom. So I know a lot of you have asked for that over the years, and we've finally gotten a chance to get those up. They're on a page that I think Mark will put in maybe the offers or the chat somewhere, the link to that.
I'll put that in the chat in just a second.
That'll be in the chat. So we'll reference those templates in the demo today. So kicking it off, the Moab artist cards come in a number of sizes. For those of you that have been using them for a long time, they used to be branded with Museo, but now we've brought those into the Moab line. So all of the cards are Moab cards. You may remember the Entradalopes, which are our old 7x10-inch cards that come in bright and natural. And then the artist cards come in 3 different sizes: small, large, and square. And we do have templates for all of those sizes. So as I mentioned, we have Photoshop templates now for all the cards. Lightroom templates will be coming soon, but there are PDF instructions for both Photoshop and Lightroom on Mac and Windows now. So we have separate screenshots and instructions for those of you who are using Windows, because I know all the menus are different and the positions are different and some of the options are different. So that'll be a big help. And it just was made today, the page, but it's moabpaper.com/templates. Mark just put that in the chat. So you can head over there if you want to download the instructions, download the PSD files. If you are looking through those instructions and you notice maybe something is not quite right or different, feel free to let me know, because I've proofed them as best I can, but always something slips through and you have a little error in there somewhere. So feel free to give us your feedback on that as well. So if you're just getting started with card printing, or maybe it's been a while, a lot of people will check in and they'll say, hey, these cards are kind of expensive. I don't want to spend half a box trying to get it right. Well, you can always take photo paper and cut it down to the card size and use that as your test. So if you have a stack of photo mats sitting around, that's going to have a very similar look to the cards. Cut that down to whatever size card you're using and then run that for your printer. And because it is double-sided, you can do tests on both sides. And that'll let you just make sure that your settings are right, or double check your margins or things like that, so you're not using up part of a card box just getting started. So that's always something that often even I do here when I'm trying to test something new. And then when you're comfortable with those settings, or you've got the notes you need or whatever else, then load up your cards and away you go. So we're going to jump right into the live demo. And Mark, Robert is asking a question that I was going to ask you before the show, but I forgot. That panoramic size that used to be in the card lineup, do we have any plans of adding that back or not?
No, I was just about to type it into the chat window, but I'll voice it out here publicly. No, we're not going to introduce that. It was a nice style and a nice card, but it sold pretty poorly. And in order to do our converting minimums, we just it just didn't make it economical, and we could introduce it again, but then the price would be 2 times the regular card. So it just doesn't make sense, unfortunately.
So one thing you can do then, if you're looking for a panoramic card size and you're not averse to cutting them yourself, when you could use, say, the Entrada, and as long as the grain direction on the sheet is the direction that you'd want the fold, you could absolutely take letter sheets and cut out your own 8x9, or I forget what the panorama was, maybe 5x9.
Yeah.
So that's always an option if you want a custom card size, because the same things we're working with this evening regarding custom paper size and the setup and all that sort of thing, you can make your own custom paper size. I mean, as long as it's larger than 4x6 and smaller than the max sheet size in your printer, you can really make any size card as long as you're willing to cut the sheet and fold it. So that's absolutely an option if you're looking for those panoramic cards.
The grain direction on all the box sheet format is listed on the back in the lot number. So you'll see either a GS for grain short or a GL for grain long. We don't have separate SKUs or item codes for those. So if you are at your store, if you do have a box in your hand, you can flip it over and see if it's grain long or grain short the paper.
All right, here we are. So this is one of the new templates that we've put up. This is for the small artist cards. And these are all built the same way. So down in the layers palette on the bottom right, there are two layers, one for outside instructions. So this would be to print the front and the back. And then one for inside instructions. And this kind of helps guide you into adding text into the card. So we'll start with the outside instructions. They're all labeled. They're all about the same. The biggest difference between all of them is obviously they're all different sizes for the card sizes. And then also down in the front panel, I have the exact crop dimensions. So if you're going to crop your image. And these dimensions assume sort of using the minimum margins on your printer. Some printers will be a little bit different. So one thing that you can actually do that's kind of helpful is if you take a card and you can just print off the template itself, and you'll see that on the printer that I used for this, the leading edge has a slightly larger margin than the other edges. So if you print off this template, it'll give you a sense of how your printer prints the cards and what your minimum margins are. And then you also have kind of a hard copy of the instructions on a sheet. So if it's something you want to reference while you're working, that's a great tool that you can use if you just print off that template before you go and turn off the layers. So we have our template open here, and then see if I can zoom in a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the image that I want to print. And here we have it. So obviously it's not the same aspect ratio, and I need to crop it. So going back to my small card, I know that for that horizontal image, the biggest I can crop it is basically 5.5 by 4.25. And again, all these steps are in the instructions. So if you want to download those and kind of page along with us, you can absolutely do that. So going back to my card, I'm going to go to the crop tool. And then one of the options in the crop settings is something that says width times height times resolution. Because if you're going to copy and paste something between Photoshop documents, they both have to have the same resolution setting. Otherwise, it will resize the image that you're copying and pasting. So all these templates are set to 300 pixels an inch as the default. So when we crop, we're going to crop to that same 300 pixels an inch. So I go width times height times resolution. And this just happens to be one apparently that I set up earlier when I was testing. So my width from that template is 5.55. My height is 4.25. And then you want to make sure, I can't zoom unfortunately in here, but with each of these dimensions, it says 5.55 and then it says IN for inches. Sometimes Photoshop will default to PX for pixels. And so when you go to crop this, you'll end up with a 5 pixel by 4 pixel image, which barely shows up. So if you crop and you suddenly get this minuscule image, that's what happened. And you just have to go back and put in inches for each one. So 5.5 by 4.25 inches. And then that third box is resolution. So again, 300 pixels an inch. So that gives me my box down here, and I can move the image around as I desire, and then either hit enter on the keyboard, or you can also check the box. So now this is cropped to the width, the height, and the resolution that we need for the template. So I'm going to go to select all, and then edit copy. I'm going to go to my small horizontal template, and I'm going to go edit paste. And because everything was lined up correctly, you can see that image fits within the margin guidelines on the template. So now if I go up to the move tool, I can slide the image down to the bottom guideline. And then you see the note here that says the upper blue line is the fold line. So you'll see we don't snug it up right to that fold line because we want a consistent margin all the way around. So that is all set for the front image. Now, if I want to put something on the back, my logo or holiday 2020 or something like that, just note that on the horizontal cards, you have to make that text upside down. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn off the instruction layer. So that disappears. I'm going to go to the text tool. I'm going to make a text box. And the easiest way to center text in Photoshop is to make your text box from one margin to the other all the way across. And then type what you want to add. And then up at the top, you can see that the centered paragraph is selected, so that automatically centers our text. Now, if I go to Edit, Transform, and I rotate my text 180 degrees, that will make it upside down, which means when we print and fold the card, it will be correctly oriented. So that's all you have to do to print the outside of your cards. So I'm going to go ahead, and this was a small artist card. I'm going to get out a small card. And we're going to go ahead and load that in the printer. So this is Canon's new Pro 300 pigment printer. But with all these cards, except in very specific circumstances, you're going to always load them just like you load photo paper, short edge first, right in the printer. And then we return to Photoshop. Okay. So if you've never printed artist cards before, the first thing you're going to need to do is to make a custom paper size. So we're going to say File, Print. And again, all of these dimensions and everything else are all listed on that instruction PDF. And we're going to wait for Photoshop to do what it does. And still wait. Mark, any questions while we wait for Photoshop?
There was one, but you might have answered it because I was typing, so I don't.
Not a problem.
One was from SL Bear about how would you adjust for uneven borders?
Got it. So the best way to adjust for uneven borders, I'm guessing the question pertains to that maybe the leading edge border is a little bigger than the side borders. What you'll want to do is you'll want to make all of your borders equal to that leading edge. So let's say your leading edge is 1/4 of an inch, then you'd want to make all sides 1/4 of an inch in that template so that it fits your printer. And again, that's something you're going to discover that's different from printer to printer. We did our best with the templates to accommodate that, but obviously we can't hit on everything. So
there were a couple of questions about what the templates are compatible with. And you had made these for Photoshop, Elizabeth.
Photoshop, and they will also work with Photoshop elements. They're PSD files, and that allows us to have the layers so you can turn the instructions on and off. Yes.
And Print Studio Pro, no?
You know, Print Studio Pro will let you print this stuff, but you're still going to set it up the same way in Photoshop. So you open the Photoshop template, add the images, turn off the instruction layers, and then instead of using this Photoshop print window, you would just say automate Print Studio Pro, and then you can print it in there. So that's definitely an option if you want to use Print Studio Pro to print your cards. All right, so we're back here in the Photoshop print settings. First thing you want to say always is Photoshop manages colors, and then choose your color profile. For instance, here we're using the artist cards on the Pro 300. And then one thing that I do with all the Moab profiles is at the end of the profile name, again, I apologize, the text is small. It says Moab Artist Card Pro 300, and then it says MPP at the end. That stands for matte photo paper. So as you use the paper more, instead of having to always go to our website to say, hey, what's the media setting? You can just look at the color profile and know that MPP is matte photo paper. So for now, we'll go to print settings. And then I have these saved already as custom paper sizes, but let's say you're just doing this for the first time. So what you do is on the Mac, you go down to Manage Custom Sizes at the bottom of the size list, and a window will open where you can enter a new size. So you'll hit the plus button, and it will bring up at the bottom of the list something called Untitled. So we'll just call this Moab artist card small. And then we know that the small cards are 5.8 wide. Again, always that smaller number is the width, by 9 inches high. And then on the Mac, what you're able to do is on these margins, you're able to set all your margins to 0. And what that does is that utilizes the maximum print area on your printer and then allows the template to automatically center, because the template is set to the paper size, but with those margin guides that I've added in, it'll help to hopefully not do any cropping or uneven borders on your image. So we've given it a name, artist card small, 5.8 wide, 9 inches high. We've zeroed out the margins. We just click OK to save that. Now in Windows, the process is slightly different, but there are screenshots in that download PDF for Windows that outlines the same process. So we have our correct card size, and then go down to quality and media. And this is again matte photo paper. It runs through the top feed. With these cards, that generally on the manual feed, the minimum width is 8 inches. So you'll always need to use the cards in the top feed or the sheet feeder of your printer. That's the same for Canon or Epson. So we're going to make sure it's top feed. I'm going to hit save. And if you're using a Canon printer, you're going to get a warning that says the paper size does not have wide margins. You don't need to worry about that. That's just saying that it's possible you could get a little ink on the edge of the sheet or something like that. You can just click OK. And that returns us to Photoshop, and we can see that everything still looks good. Our image is correct orientation. Our text is upside down. If we scroll down, you can see that I can leave center image checked because I set those margins to 0, so it's not going to move it around in a funny way. And we're at 100% print size. So now I can just click print. And this will also tell me, if you have this turned on, that the image is larger than the paper's printable area. And again, we don't have to worry about that because the template is the paper size, but we've put in those margins with the guidelines, so you're not going to have to worry about losing any of your image. So we just click proceed.
Lou's asking if it's the same margin settings for Epson. Does he need to use Borderless?
No, so I'm going to get to Borderless in a minute. There are a couple of ways with a couple of card sizes to print Borderless, but I want to get everybody printing cards first before we get into the what if and the one-offs that are Borderless printing on cards. So that was a horizontal image. Let's go ahead and do a vertical template while that card prints. So this template is for the Moab Entradalopes, the standard 7x10 cards. So I have an image here. Again, first I want to see that my maximum image size, so my crop size, is going to be 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. So if I go to my vertical image here, again, I'm going to go back to the crop tool and use the same width times height times resolution. And we're going to be 4.75 wide by 6.75 tall. And we're at 300 pixels an inch. And I'm going to make this a little tighter. Then you can also, to accept a crop, you can click the check mark at the top of the screen, or you can press enter. Okay, so that's ready. So I'm going to go select all, edit, copy, go to my vertical card template, click paste, go to the move tool, and drag that over to where it needs to be on the panel. When you're printing a vertical card, you have just the left and right, so you don't need to reverse your text like you do with the horizontal card. On the vertical card, you would just add a text or a logo as you wanted. I'm going to leave the back on this blank, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the instructions. And then again, we're going to go to print.
Is that your puppy?
That's our niece dog. She belongs to our nieces. So she is a 1-year-old pug. She just had her birthday, I think, a week ago, and is a ball of energy, to say the least. but pretty darn cute and poses well for holiday card demo photos. All right, so we're in the same print window. We're going to use the same profile, so that stayed up. But now this is the Entradalope card, the 7x10 card, instead of the small artist card. So we're going to go double check that custom media setting. Again, we'd go to Manage Custom Sizes under the paper size. Make one called Moab Entradalopes. The smaller measurement is always the width, so this is 7x10. And again, I zeroed out the margins. Click OK. Quality media, we're still using matte photo paper, and again, we're still using the top feed, or if you're on Epson, the sheet feed. And it tells us because it's a Canon, it doesn't have wide margins. Just say OK. So that's ready to go. I'm going to cut back. So this is the card that we just printed, and you can see that even the demo makes mistakes sometimes. So I'll have to go back and find out why in the world. It looks like it didn't feed it right because it's a little crooked. So we'll try that one again. But for the Entradalopes, I'm going to load my sheet in the printer again, short edge first. And this time I'm going to make sure to snug up the paper guides in case I forgot to do that last time. And on these printers, they'll often ask you, what's the paper type, what's the paper size? The software that you're using overrides what you set on the printer, so you don't necessarily have to set those options every time, which is kind of a time saver. Okay, so I know that I loaded our paper correctly this time. I snugged up the margins. So we'll go back to Photoshop. And I've got our card set up here. So we'll go ahead and click print. And hopefully this time everything comes out as it should. So then if you want to add text to the inside of the card, there's also an instruction layer for the inside of the card. And I have a file I created with some text for the inside. Okay, so here's my inside file. And this I created so it's sized to be just about right, 4.5 by 6.5. So that's a little smaller than my template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the canvas size, and I'm going to make that 4.75 like the template, and 6.75. So what that will do is that won't change any of my text or anything else, but it'll give me a little more white around the image so that it will fit in the template. So again, select all, copy. I'm going to go back to my template. And so here we have the inside instructions turned on. So I'm going to paste. And it appears that I just selected a snowflake and not the entire thing. So keep in mind, if you've made a layered document, that you'll probably want to flatten it before you try to copy it. So we're going to go to Layer, Flatten Image. Now we can say, select all, edit, copy. Now let's try again. And there we have the whole inside. So I'm going to turn off the instructions so you can see it. And then we're going to drag it over, and if you have snap to borders selected, it will snap right to your margins and be centered in that page. So now this is ready to print, and it looks like our card came out properly. So when your card comes out of the printer, it will come out with the blank or the back first and the image second. So when you load it in to print the second side, you're going to load it in face down, printed side first. So there's our printed side. That's going to go in the printer first, and it's going to face down.
Does it matter which you print first, inside or outside? Is there a preference?
I like to print the inside first because it's kind of my comfortable workflow, and I find it not confusing that way. But if it's easier for you to print the inside first, that's fine. If you're using an image that has a lot of black or dark colors or that sort of thing, you might want to run a test. Sometimes when you're printing the second side, it'll scuff the first side just a little bit. It usually doesn't happen. I definitely recommend waiting 30 minutes between printing the front versus the back so you can let those inks set. But again, if you have an image that's maybe a little more delicate or has a lot of dark tones to it, if you print the inside message first and then print the front of the card, you don't risk scratching the image at all. So it's a personal workflow. But again, if you print the front, the inside first, it's the same workflow. Printed side down, print first on the back side, and then out it comes. So we'll go ahead and print the inside. And because we're using the same template, everything will stay the same. So here's our print template. Again, all our settings are the same because we're using the same template. So we can just click print. And then that will come out in just a minute.
Do you spray your cards with desert varnish?
You can. I don't think it's necessary unless you know that you're sending a card to somebody that might keep it up all year or cut off the front and put it up or something. But typically you don't need to save them because we're not expecting our cards to last, 10, 20, 30 years sitting on the mantle.
You don't keep my cards I send you?
Not through January, no. They are lovely. All right, so I'm going to transition from Photoshop over to Lightroom, and we'll go over the same thing. And Lou says, did we discuss color management and paper profiles? We briefly did, but yes, we do have artist card profiles for all the printers that we have profiles for. So if you just go in there and download the artist card profile, you'll be all set to go. And
you do separate webinars on color management and profiles as well.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in deep diving a little more into color management and profiles, if you go to our YouTube page, there's a wealth of information there that we'll cover in depth. All right, so if we go to Lightroom, but first we got to check out the card that just came out. So here it is, just came out of the printer, and you can see that here's that inside document that we made. And because we fed it in right, there's the front. And if we fold it, we have the nice outside and the nice inside. And again, I didn't put anything on the back, but you certainly can put a signature or a logo or anything else on the back. So one successful printed card. All right, so now we'll take a jump into Lightroom, and we're going to do the same thing. As I mentioned early on, we don't have templates for Lightroom yet, but in the Lightroom print module, it's extremely easy to set up a quick card template. And then the nice thing about Lightroom is you can select, for instance, multiple images and print 10 different cards with 10 different images without any extra setup.
And just as a reminder, you did load up the instructions for Lightroom onto that same templates page.
Yes. So moabpaper.com/templates has the Photoshop PSD templates for Photoshop and Elements. And then it has PDF instructions for Photoshop and Lightroom on the Mac, and also Photoshop and Lightroom in Windows. So here we are in Lightroom. And normally you'll start in the Develop module with your image. I apologize for the slight lag here in the screen. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is select the crop tool, and then you'll go down to Enter Custom under the aspect. And since we're going to use the same Entradalope 7x10, we know that that is 4.75 wide by 6.75 tall. So we'll click OK. And then again, crop as desired. And press return or click the crop tool. So that's got the right aspect ratio on our image. So we can go right over to the print module. And then the first thing that you'll want to do is go to page setup. Now, again, if you've printed cards before, or if you were working in Photoshop and you already made that custom page setup, custom page size, it will be available here in Lightroom because you saved it and gave it a name. So that was Moab Entradalopes that we created. So I can just pick that. And generally, if you're doing a vertical card in Lightroom, you want to choose the landscape layout. So here I have landscape selected, and I click OK. And then going over to the print options, I want a single image, I want zoom to fill and rotate to fit turned on. And then right here in the layout options, this is where Lightroom really shines when you're trying to print cards. So for the sake of easy measurement, I'm just going to give this card a 1/4 inch margin all the way around. So right, top, and bottom are all a 1/4 inch, and left is 5 1/4 inch. So that makes sure we have a 5-inch back panel and then a 1/4 inch margin all the way around, which gives us the cell size of 6.5 by 4.5. So here, just by adjusting these margins, and again, these numbers are also samples in the instructions, I've created this basically a card template myself. And if I have multiple images down here in my film strip, I can select all 5 of those and it will center them in that cell that we made. So if you scroll down to the bottom, again, you're going to look for that Moab artist card profile. Now, if you've just downloaded the profile and you haven't added it to Lightroom yet, this is a step that's often confusing. You go to this profile list and there's very few profiles and you don't see the one that you just downloaded. What you're going to do is you're going to go all the way down here to Other, and that will open up a window with all of the profiles installed on your computer. Now, if you download and install the profile with Lightroom running, it won't recognize that new profile. So you need to quit Lightroom and then relaunch it before you can add the profile. These are all in alphabetical order. So I'd scroll down to Moab, artist card, and I would just check the box next to it and click OK. And that will select it and add it to our list here. So again, Moab artist card, Canon Pro 300. So then the last thing we need to do is choose the media setting. So I'm going to hit printer. And that will bring up our print settings, the same as we did in Photoshop. So you say quality and media, it's matte photo paper from the top feed. And I need to load a card. So we can print that. So again, we're going to load the card vertically right in the printer. And then I'm just going to click print here. And it will give me the wide margin notification, which we can just acknowledge and keep moving on. So the really nice thing about Lightroom is once you've printed the first side of your card, all you have to do is click on that image you made for the inside. It will put it right into that same template, and you can just hit the print button again because you've saved all of your settings. So Lightroom is a really convenient way to print cards, especially if you want to use multiple images or anything else like that. It's really powerful when you're setting up these templates.
And you're setting standard print?
Yeah, it all depends. And this is something that you can decide for yourself. I usually use standard during demos just because it produces a faster print. But again, that's something you want to test for yourself. So you might say highest quality when you're printing the photo on the front, and then standard when you're printing the text on the inside, because you don't need as much detail in your text as you do on the front of your card. So something I recommend always testing. So then we're going to take a quick trip into borderless printing. And again, there'll be a write-up on our website. I think next week I'm going to try and get it finished kind of about borderless printing. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint. So borderless options when it comes to cards are available, but definitely limited. And that's because borderless printing is determined by the print driver. We can't override that. So only if Canon or Epson offers a borderless option are we able to use that with cards. On the two newest Canon printers, the Pro 200 and the Pro 300, you can do borderless printing on the Entradalopes, which are 7x10, because those printers have a 7-inch by 10-inch media setting with a borderless option. So that is one size you can print on Canon. With Epson, borderless printing is available on the SureColor P series printers with certain widths, and this is where it can get a little confusing. So we'll try to be real clear about it. So again, here's the card that we just printed from Lightroom. So if you're going to print borderless on the Epson printers, you're going to do the opposite of what you always do. Instead of loading the paper narrow edge first, you're going to load the paper the wide edge first. And when you make your custom paper size, you're going to make it with the largest number first and the smallest number second. So it's exactly the opposite of how you would always do it. So we'll go back and we'll switch to Photoshop, and we'll print a borderless card real quick. Go through that process. So again, this is the Entradalope 7x10 template. I'm going to turn off the inside and I'm going to turn back on the outside. But because I cropped this, it doesn't go all the way to the edge of the card. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that layer and go back to my image. And in the history, I'm going to undo my crop. So we're back to the original image. So now when I crop it, I want it to be 5x7 at 300, because that is the exact size of the panel on my card. So we're going to size that to 5x7 at 300. Check the box. Select all. We're going to copy that. We go to the template, and we're going to go paste. Go to the move tool. And again, because we're borderless, you'll see now that it does go all the way to the edge of the paper. So that's the only setup difference when you're preparing your image. You can still use the template, but instead of respecting the margin guidelines, you're going to go all the way to the edge of the template. I apologize if you hear the noise in the background. One of the printers in this room has decided to clean itself. So I'm going to go File, Print. So again, we're going to use the Canon, and that's the Pro 300. And then in the print settings, instead of going to our custom paper size, there will be a 7x10 borderless option up here. And again, that's included in the print driver, and that's what allows us to print borderless. So I'm going to select that, and then make sure we still say matte photo paper. And again, you can choose standard or you can choose highest when you're printing your photos. Absolutely up to you. I'm going to stick to standard just to keep it quick for the demo. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to say that's fine, that it doesn't have wide margins. And then because this is a Canon printer, I'm going to go ahead and load my card in the same way we've been loading everything else in. And then we're just going to click print. So that was borderless printing on one of the new Canon Pro 200 or the Canon Pro 300. Unfortunately, the Pro 1, Pro 10, even the Pro 1000 right now, the Pro 1000 doesn't have the option for a 7x10 borderless card. Hopefully they'll add it in another firmware release early next year.
So Darcy has a good question because borderless often causes confusion because only certain paper types are in the driver, as you mentioned. So you can't use the regular Moab artist cards. You have to use the Entradalopes, which has a 7x10 format in the Canon driver. Could you fool the printer? Darcy asked, could you just set your paper size to a 1/4 inch larger and fool it?
Possibly. Usually the printer will say, hey, you lied to me about the paper size. The other challenge is when a printer prints borderless, it is actually spraying the ink off the edge of the page on both sides. So if you look inside your printer, you might see a little sponge that goes all the way across, or you'll see little pieces of sponge. And so if you try to fool it into a borderless size that's not actually available, it's going to spray ink off the edge of that card, and it could be spraying the ink into an area that's not designed to absorb ink. So it may be possible, but beware if you're trying to do it, that it is going to overspray the ink inside the printer, possibly in a place that it's not supposed to. And also it just may tell you no because it's recognized that the paper isn't quite the size you set it to. So if you want to go outside of what we're going to discuss tonight, feel free to experiment. Never be afraid to experiment when you're printing, but just keep those in mind that you might have to get in there with a little foam makeup swab or something and do a little ink cleanup if you get a little overspray. All right. So now if we want to do borderless printing with Epson, the process is just a little different. So again, I'm going to say File, Print. And we're going to choose the Epson, the new P700. So again, it's a P series, so it will let us do the custom borderless sizes. So I'm going to pick my color profile. And most of you will not have this many profiles. I just happen to have quite a few. So artist card, P700, and then here's my UPPPM for ultra premium presentation paper matte as the media setting initials. So now I go to print settings, and where we were using the Moab Entradalopes 7x10, we're going to use the same card. But if I go to printer settings, you'll see that all I can do is sheet or roll. So obviously I want sheet, but I don't have a borderless option. So if we go to the manage custom sizes, you'll see that the Entradalopes are 7 on the width, 10 on the height, like we would always do for making a custom paper setting. Except when you're trying to make a custom borderless paper setting, you have to switch that. So Moab 7x10 Entradalope borderless, you see the only difference is that the width is 10 and the height is 7. So once I select that, immediately it lets me do a sheet borderless auto expand on the Epson. Again, ultra premium presentation matte. I'll just leave it at standard. I'm going to click save. And because, again, it changed the orientation in the setup, then I have to go up here to layout and I have to click the portrait layout button so that the preview matches how I want it to print. And then lastly, when we're printing this card blank, instead of putting it in vertically, as we always do, you're going to have to put it in horizontally, long edge first. So unfortunately, I don't have a third camera for the Epson printer over here, but I'm going to go ahead and load that paper in. Again, long edge first. We have everything else set up correctly. And I'm going to click print. And the same setup would apply if you were using Lightroom. Again, you would make a custom paper size with 10 as the width and 7 as the height, and then load your paper long edge first.
And when you load it long edge first, is that only for borderless printing?
Only for borderless printing, yes. And it also kind of helps keep it less confusing because we've been conditioned all of our lives to never load the paper long edge first. But if you're printing custom borderless sizes with cards, you have to load that paper long edge first.
While we're waiting for that, George asks, during the auto expand, does that scale the image at all?
It does just a little bit. So you're gonna lose just a little bit of the image, and you do have some control over that. We'll go back to File, Print. go back to print settings. And then if I go to, this is the Epson again, if I go to Advanced Media Control, I apologize, that's the wrong thing. Page layout settings. There's a little slider for expansion. So it defaults here apparently to max. I almost always print at mid. That helps to crop off a little less of your image. You can go down to minimum, but often in my experience on minimum, I get just a hairline of white on one edge of the paper. So I always like to do the mid expansion when it comes to printing borderless. Any other questions while I refeed the paper in this printer?
Yeah, how robust are the tools, the text tools in Lightroom?
That's a great question, and I am not sure because I am not a Lightroom power user. So if somebody out there wants to jump in, I'd be happy to. What I would be inclined to do would be to make my inside message in Photoshop, or if you're an Adobe user in InDesign, or you could even do it in Word. Just make sure that you do a custom size, the size of the card. And then you can just save that as a JPEG and then import it into Lightroom and print that. Would probably be the easiest way to do your cards.
While you're doing that, we had Leah came up with the suggestion about about borderless printing. Instead of fooling the printer, you always print on a larger sheet and then trim your borders so it is borderless. It won't be a perfect 5x7, but it'll be slightly smaller.
Correct. Yeah, and that always works. But then, of course, you have to trim your cards, which is always a challenge. But yeah, many ways to achieve that borderless look if it's something you're really looking for. But I would say easiest one is to do the custom size if you have an Epson, and that works for our Entradalopes and also the large artist cards. Or if you have one of those Canon printers, you can just use the Entradalopes and then that custom 7x10 borderless paper size that's now available in the driver. And Andrew says you can only create one line of text in Lightroom. So thank you for chiming in on that. I did not know that. So I would definitely say, if you use Word, then you can use the little candy cane clip art or whatever else, or InDesign or any other program that you want to do your text in. Just make sure that when you do start your document, you make that the size of one panel of the card. And in those instructions, we do have the artist card size and the panel size. And I think on our website, we have the panel size listed as well.
What Epson printer are you using?
This is the P700. So it's their newest 13-inch desktop printer. And the really exciting thing with these new Epson printers is they've finally set it so that you don't have to switch between matte black and photo black. As an ink switch, you can put any paper in at any time, and the printer has matte black and photo black available in the print head. So that's a big upgrade for Epson. Obviously, Canon has offered that forever in their printers, but with Epson, that's a new thing across the SureColor P series line, and it definitely is a lot nicer, and it prevents you from having to spend money when you want to switch from matte black to photo black. All right, so Mark, I know you posted a while ago, but for those of you that are jumping in maybe later, the instructions for both Windows and Mac, Photoshop and Lightroom, are on our website at moabpaper/templates. And then also the PSD Photoshop document templates that I've been using this evening in the demo. Those work in Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. You can download all those templates there. And we have separate ones for horizontal and vertical images. And then over the next week or so, I'm going to work on creating templates for Lightroom and instructions on how to install those, so that those will be available as well for all of you Lightroom users out there. I think that's all for questions.
Yeah, Andrew has one about feeding inkjet paper through a laser printer. The inkjet receptive coating that we apply to the paper is designed just for inkjet. Due to the heat elements in a laser printer, it will distort and it won't ruin. You can put matte paper through a laser printer, but you'll never want to put a luster or a glossy paper through a laser printer. It would just melt up there.
And then the other thing that I was thinking of, I know some folks have emailed in over the last week that their favorite mail order place is out of cards because 'tis the season for everybody to buying cards. So definitely, if you live in a city with a local camera store or go online, usually the smaller retailers will have cards, especially this year when foot traffic has been a challenge. So I know that both camera stores here in Seattle, Glazers and Kenmore Camera, both have cards in stock, and you can order those online. I think Freestyle down in LA has cards in stock, and I'm sure some of our other retailers around the country have cards in stock. So if the place you usually order mail order from might be out, check your local camera store or call up your friend in another city and say, hey, where do you shop? And give them a call, because I think shopping small this year is super important, and a lot of those places do have them in stock. So you can definitely find them out there if you're looking for a card.
Go to our where to buy section, and if you have trouble finding it, we can always call our customer service and we can guide you. Digital Art Supplies has them, DTG has them, so we have a number of places throughout the country if you can't find them at some of the larger stores.
And here's our borderless, custom-sized Epson card. So proof that it is possible. But again, we loaded it long edge first and it came out. So you will definitely want to do a little testing if you're going to do borderless and you're going to then print the inside as well, as to which way you need to reload the card in the printer to print the inside on the correct panel.
Great. We're just about running out of time here, so I don't think there's any other questions here.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays and stay safe.
Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and good luck printing your cards and bringing a smile to everybody that you send your cards to, friends and family. Thanks for tuning in.